Well, welcome everybody. I'm so glad to be with you today. My name is John, and I'm going to give a presentation today on Black History Month. And before I get started, I just want to show my appreciation for Gina and for Millie for giving me the opportunity to do this presentation today. And so we'll just go ahead and get started. February, of course, is Black History Month, and the actual theme for Black History Month in 2026 is a century of Black history commemorations. And we'll get back to that idea in just a bit. So today we're going to be talking about African Americans in the military during World War II. I thought it was a topic that it's not only because of the things that the soldiers did during World War II, but it's also what they did after they came back, which was really important. So talking in front of people isn't necessarily my favorite thing to do. As a matter of fact, I really feel that my superpower is listening. I really love listening to people, listening to their stories and their adventures and even their challenges. But I also feel that I'm at a point where I really need to share my story and share my experiences, and that's my plan for today. So just a little bit more about myself. I have spent the last 35 years working for the United States Department of Energy as an electrical engineer. I've been doing planning and project coordination for local electric utilities. And I've been married for the last 30 years to my awesome wife who is here today. And we have lived in Auburn for the past 25 years with our two sons. And for the past 20 years, we have been members here at the Auburn YMCA. And it all started with swimming lessons. So when our kids were small, my wife and I, we talked and said, we got to get our kids in swimming lessons. And because we got all this water around here, and it was a safety issue for us. So, matter of fact, I just read a stat a few days ago that even today, 2 out of every 3 African Americans don't know how to swim. So it is definitely a safety issue. So anyway, we tried another facility, didn't work out. We came here to the Auburn YMCA, and we really had some great instructors. They were so patient, and our kids became excellent swimmers. And so even beyond that, as our kids got older, both of them worked here at the YMCA. One of them actually became a lifeguard, and the other one worked at the front desk as a customer service rep. So the YMCA has been great for our family, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. Okay, so just a few housekeeping things. I've got some little disclaimers here. So I just want to say that any of the opinions expressed in this presentation are all mine. There's nothing, I don't speak for any organization, I don't speak for the African American community, I don't speak for nobody but me. I may discuss some things that may be a little uncomfortable. So I just want to kind of warn everybody that we should probably put on our mental seatbelts. I'm not going to hammer on it too much, but they're, the journey for African Americans, from 16, 19 till today, it's been a rough ride, and that's just putting it mildly. We're just kind of getting out of the blocks, as it were, as a community, getting access and opportunities, and there's just no sugarcoating it, and I'm not going to try and do it today. It's just not something I can do. There's about 40 slides or so in the presentation. I'm hoping that I'll be done in less than 45 minutes, but I think I'll be done, at least done within an hour. So just wanted to mention that. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about my intention for this presentation. I just hope that after the presentation that we all gain an understanding and appreciation for the African American soldiers that served, and like I said, not only for what they did during the war, but after the war. So, and for me, I didn't even know about some of these soldiers until recently. So, mention that. Just a quick word about terms. I really don't like using, white, black, brown, to describe people's skin color, but that's what we do here in America. I'd much rather prefer geographic terms like African American, Asian American, Native American, but I will use those terms during the presentation. I think we all understand what that means. All right, moving on. I want to start by talking about anniversaries real quick. Just want to say that right here at the YMCA, we're celebrating our 150th anniversary. And I think that's very cool. And then also, the United States is celebrating its 250th anniversary. But there's a couple of other anniversaries related to Black history that I want to tell everybody about. So 2026 is the 10th anniversary of the National African American Museum of History and Culture. It opened on September 24th, 2016, during the last year of the Obama administration. The museum is part of the Smithsonian, and it's located in Washington, D.C. Some people refer to it as the Blacksonian. And it has some unique architecture. It was inspired by West African art. Well, it looks like a basket to me, but it is unique. It's not like any of the other buildings in Washington, D.C. And it also has a bronze colored iron lattice around the building that symbolizes the work performed by enslaved African Americans. I have not been to the museum, but I have taken a virtual tour of it, and it is fantastic. So I'm really looking forward to getting there and visiting one of these days. Okay, one of the items I actually thought was in the National African American Museum was the bus that Rosa Parks rode on in 1955 when she was arrested for not moving to the back of the bus. And it appears that this bus is actually in Detroit, and it's a part of the Henry Ford Museum. And Rosa Parks moved to Detroit after the Montgomery bus boycott in Alabama. So I have a quick story to tell you about Rosa Parks. So I actually got a chance to hear Rosa Parks speak. This was many years ago, it was about over 30 years ago now, but she was on a tour, and she came to Seattle, and she was at the University of Washington. And it was a real surreal, emotional experience for me. It's kind of like, seeing your favorite celebrity or artist. I was just amazed being in her presence. And, she's just a small little lady. She's just, 5'3" and a little over 100 pounds. But, I don't necessarily remember all that she said, but one of the things I do want to talk about here, a little bit of a side conversation, is that one of the things that was on her mind during the day where she refused to give up her seat was Emmett Till. And I hope all of you know who Emmett Till was, but for the folks that may be watching on the recording, Emmett Till was a young man from Chicago, teenage young man, and went down to Mississippi to visit some relatives, and he didn't come back home. He was murdered by some white men. And the men that killed Emmett Till, they really weren't interested in him. He was just a kid from out of town, you know. But what he did allegedly was whistle at a white woman, kind of did that sort of whistle. And so what they were doing with him by killing him was actually sending a message. And that message was, if you try to do what he did, what happened to him is going to happen to you. And it was all about the support of white supremacy and maintaining the culture of white supremacy. And just for me, my definition of white supremacy is it's the systematic denial of opportunities with the purpose of maintaining power and privilege and control over non-white people. And so that's what this was about. And so the men were brought to trial. It was an all-white jury. No blacks were allowed, and they were acquitted, and they were set free. And the jury lasted maybe an hour before they decided on the acquittal. It was just, I don't know if they even really deliberated. They just said, you know, we're just here, we're just going to hang out, and then we're just going to render our verdict. But anyway, the point of that is that Rosa Parks knew about Emmett Till. And as this was 1955, he was murdered in the summer. The trial went through the fall, and the time that where Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat was early December. So this was national news. Mississippi was right next door to Alabama, so she was very familiar with this whole situation. And combined with all of the things that Rosa Parks had dealt with during her life as a young girl, dealing with Jim Crow and second-class citizenship, she had enough. And she just said, you know what, I'm going to stand up for Emmett Till, I'm going to stand up for my community by sitting down and staying in my seat. So, as a result of her action, she was arrested and she was sent to jail. And and as a result of her going to jail, the community rallied and they started what was known as the Montgomery bus boycott. And that boycott was led by a young minister named Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So I say all that to say that just as part of history, as great as Dr. King was, and he gets his own holiday, people may have not ever known about him if it wasn't for Rosa Parks. And I want to make sure that Rosa Parks gets her shine and her flowers. I just also learned that Rosa Parks' birthday is February the 4th. So she actually is a part of Black history. She's part of Black History Month by just having her birthday in the month of February. So thank you for letting me share on that. So speaking of anniversaries, 2026 is actually the 100th anniversary of Black History Month. So in February 1926, the first Negro History Week was launched by Dr. Carter G. Woodson. And then Negro History Week was actually extended to the entire month of February in 1976. So the second week of February had some significance in that there were two special people that Dr. Woodson wanted to honor. The first one was Abraham Lincoln, and his birthday is the 12th of February. And the other person was Frederick Douglass. His birthday is February 14th. So you have the great emancipator and the great abolitionist both in the same week. And that's why Dr. Woodson wanted to select that week as Negro History Week. I tried to find a interesting quote or cool quote by Dr. Woodson, but he is, his language is very formal and kind of archaic, so I found this quote from one of his contemporaries, which is George Santayana, and it just says that those that cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. And I think that really captures the intent of what Dr. Woodson had in starting Black History Month. So to that point, I just want to talk real quickly about an incident that you may have heard about that occurred in Philadelphia. So a few weeks ago in Philadelphia, there was a display that was removed regarding the enslavement of African Americans. This occurred at the President's house where George Washington lived. So one of the things that I learned is that Philadelphia was actually the second capital of the United States. New York was the first capital. And then Washington, D.C., our current capital, is actually the third U.S. capital of the United States. So George Washington was our first president, and he was a slave owner. And so he brought some of his slaves with him to Philadelphia to work in the house. So the current president of the United States issued an executive order to have the display removed. And I just want to make this point that, you know, sometimes history isn't about facts, it isn't about truth, it's about who gets to tell the story. And, you know, sometimes there's usually two sides to every story, and the truth is kind of in between. But what happens when you're only getting one side of the story? Sometimes one side of the story isn't always the truth. And so I really believe that history can help us heal if we're willing to change. But you can't change what you don't acknowledge. And so I think erasing history like this is just not going to help. And that's why we need African American history. We need history of all cultures. All right, so I have a couple of special people with military backgrounds that I'd like to talk about. Special people in my life. So first up, I'd like to honor United States Air Force Major Hints Frank Jr. He is my uncle. He was a military veteran. He served as a flight surgeon and a navigator on B-52 aircraft. He was the valedictorian of his high school, which was ironically named Frederick Douglass High School in the town in Kentucky where my family's from. It was actually a segregated high school, segregated by law. And so my mother and father went to the same high school. And my siblings and my cousins were actually the first generation, full generation in my family to go to an integrated school. And so, our kids are the second generation in my family. So I just want to say that we're very close to being in a completely different world. And I just want to say that he is one of the most intelligent people I've ever known, and I just want to honor him today. Okay, next up I want to honor United States Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Michael Anderson. Michael Anderson grew up in Spokane, Washington. His father was in the Air Force, and his father retired out of Fairchild Air Force Base in Spokane, and that's where I grew up. My family moved to Spokane shortly after I was born because I had another uncle that played basketball for Gonzaga University. And so Michael and my older brother were good friends, and our families went to the same church. So according to the stories that I've heard, Michael wanted to be an astronaut by the time he was 10 years old. And it's kind of a remarkable thing, because at that time, he's probably watching the Apollo missions that were going on in the 1960s as we were trying to put men on the moon. But at that time, there were no black astronauts. So to this day, I am amazed by the confidence and the discipline that he had to achieve his goal. And because like I said, the first black astronaut wasn't even selected by NASA until 1978. Michael was selected as an astronaut in 1994, and he made 2 missions into space. First one was in 1998 as a mission specialist on the Space Shuttle Endeavour, and then the second trip into space was on the Space Shuttle Columbia, and that Space Shuttle did not come back. So his loss was a tremendous loss for his family, tremendous loss for the African American community, and a tremendous loss for the nation. So I want to honor him today. All right, so now we're getting into World War II. And so I'm going to talk about 3 units, military units that were all African American units, and share a little bit about that and the things that they did after the war to create change here in the United States. So first up is the Tuskegee Airmen. So the Tuskegee Airmen, which consisted of the 332nd Fighter Group and the 99th Fighter Squadron, they served as escorts for U.S. bombers to defeat Nazi Germany in World War II. They were led by Benjamin Oliver Davis, Jr. He was actually the first African-American brigadier general, the 1-star general in the United States Air Force, which was then known as the Army Air Corps. And he graduated from the U.S. Military Academy in West Point in 1936. He is actually the first African-American graduate from West Point in the 20th century, and he's actually the 4th African-American overall to graduate from West Point. So during World War II, the Tuskegee Airmen flew over 1,500 missions, destroyed over 200 enemy aircraft, and they earned over 500 individual decorations, including 96 Distinguished Flying Crosses, 8 Purple Hearts, 14 Bronze Stars, and 1 Silver Star. 66 of them were killed in action, and then 32 of them became prisoners of war. The standard issue airplane was the P-51 Mustang, and they battled against jet aircraft that were used by the Germans, and so they were extremely skilled. As you can see, these airplanes are prop airplanes, and so they had to be really skilled to fight against the Germans because they had the early jet engines. Okay, so there were some early pseudoscience studies that were done in the 1920s that suggested that black men weren't smart enough to fly airplanes. But the Tuskegee Airmen proved those studies to be wrong, and it's kind of hard to see on the photo here, but written on the plane are the words "by request," and that was because the bomber units that were flying the missions into Germany actually requested the Tuskegee Airmen to provide escorts during their flights. So one of the Tuskegee Airmen is a man by the name, he's Lieutenant Colonel Ted Lumpkin. And he served as part of the 332nd Fighter Group, left active service in 1946, and then retired from the Air Force Reserves in 1979. So I have to share a story with you about Ted. So in 2014, Green River College started an aviation program, and they invited Ted to come and speak during their kickoff. And so Ted passed in 2020. He was 100 years old. So he was in his early 90s when he came in and spoke at Green River College here in Auburn. And I'll never forget it. So Ted pretty much looked like he is in this photo. He had his cap and shirt and tie, and he had his blazer and slacks and shoes, and he was looking sharp. I mean, he sounded sharp, and so he gives this talk, and after he finishes, a white man stands up in the back of the auditorium. And so I'm just thinking in the back of my mind, what is this about? You know, because I was thinking that something was going to go down. But the man stands up and he gets really emotional. And he says, "Sir, I just want to say thank you to you and all your fellow soldiers for the service you provided in World War II. My father was a crew member on those C-17 bomber aircraft that your soldiers protected. And if your soldiers had not done your job, my father wouldn't have come home. And if my father hadn't come home, I wouldn't be here today." And after he said that, the entire room, the entire audience stood up and they gave Ted a standing ovation in honor of the Tuskegee Airmen. I'll never forget that. All right, next up, I want to talk about a group that I didn't know much about until recently, called the Black Panthers. So, the Black Panthers, which consisted of the 761st Tank Battalion, served in the Eastern Theater against Nazi Germany. They participated in the famous Battle of the Bulge, and they spent 183 consecutive days in combat. They received 1 Medal of Honor, 11 Silver Stars, and approximately 300 Purple Hearts. Although some high-ranking members of the military had their doubts about their capabilities to perform, the 761st Tank Battalion was assigned to the 3rd Army per request of George Patton. He's a familiar name for military buffs, I'm sure. They received their orders to deploy on June 9th, 1944, and that was 3 days after the D-Day invasion in Normandy. And their performance helped in the war in Germany in May of 1945. They were essentially a group of nomads, but they were difference makers because they were sent everywhere that they were needed to help support the other tank battalions. One of the infamous members of the 761st Tank Battalion was Jackie Robinson, who of course broke the color barrier in Major League Baseball in 1947. However, he was transferred to another unit after refusing to sit in the back of a military bus. And there was an attempt to court-martial him, but the charges were dropped. All right, last up, the 688 Postal Battalion, another unit that I didn't know about until the last couple of years. So the 688 Central Postal Directory Battalion was an all-female unit consisting of primarily African-American women. They were tasked with sorting 17 million pieces of mail that had been undelivered during World War II. Many of the packages had only a first name or a nickname or a very common last name. The women of this organization were led by Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams. She was the highest-ranking African-American female during World War II. And the motto of the 688 was "No male, low morale." Charity Adams had a bachelor's degree from Wilberforce University in Ohio, and she also had a master's degree in psychology from Ohio State University. Oops, that's, okay. I didn't push a button, maybe I did. So, 688 Battalion worked in temporary wooden buildings in Birmingham, England, according to what I researched, and the buildings didn't have any heat. They were given 6 months to complete their task, and they did it in 3 months. Pretty amazing. After leaving England, the unit went to France to work on another mail backlog. They returned to the United States in 1946, but received no recognition for their service. I'm not quite sure where this picture is from, but I'm seeing some French words in the back, so I'm thinking that somewhere in France this photo was taken. I'm not quite sure where it's from. All right. On April 27, 2023, U.S. Army Base Fort Lee in Virginia was named Fort Gregg Adams in honor of two African Americans, Lieutenant General Arthur Gregg and Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams. It was the first U.S. military base named in honor of African American leaders. And unfortunately, the name of the base has been changed. All right. I'm about ready to land the plane here. All right, so I want to finish off talking about Delta Beta. So, in 1942, an African-American owned newspaper called the Pittsburgh Courier launched what they called the Double Victory Campaign. And it was highlighting the fact that, hey, we're going overseas to fight against fascism overseas, but what about the racism that we're dealing with here in the United States? And so this campaign was kind of the springboard. It actually, started right after the World War II ended, and it was kind of the springboard to the civil rights movement in the 1960s, led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So, these soldiers came back, and they said, we've been fighting for the country. We've been out here dodging bombs and bullets, and when we come back, we're not riding in the back of the bus anymore. We're done with that. We're not going to have separate bathrooms and schools and drinking fountains. And the other thing that they were pushing for were things like access for the GI Bill, for education, for housing, for healthcare, access to things like theaters on base. They didn't want to have separate days or separate sections, to watch movies on base. Access to the NCO club, the Non-Commissioned Officers Club. They wanted access to all of that. They didn't want to. They wanted to be able to participate and go to those places when they wanted to. So, like I said, it was the springboard that kind of led to the civil rights movement of the 1960s. And so this is a relatively short list of some of the things that they worked on. The soldiers, whether they were remaining as active duty or retired service members, in addition to working with the civil rights activists of that era. So, started off in 1948. They got the military desegregated under executive order from the Truman administration. And then in 1954, we had the desegregation of public schools through Brown versus Board of Education. 1964, we had the Civil Rights Act, banning segregation of public accommodations, Voting Rights Act in 1965, banned discrimination in voting, and then 1968, Fair Housing Act. So, in the span of 20 years, they really accomplished a lot. That generation really accomplished a lot. And you know, a lot of it's in jeopardy, being pushed back. So still relevant today. All right. For those that are still interested in learning more, there's 3 movies that I really love. One is called Red Tails. It's a movie that was done in 2012. And it was produced by George Lucas. And of course, George Lucas was the producer of Star Wars franchise. That movie has Terrence Howard and Cuba Gooding Jr. Love that movie. And then 761st, the original Black Panthers, which was narrated by Morgan Freeman, another great one. And then the last one, 6888. Movie came out a couple of years ago, written and directed by Tyler Perry, and it has Kerry Washington in the lead as Cherry Adams. As I mentioned earlier, there's some great YouTube videos on the National African American History Museum and Culture in Washington, D.C. And then there is actually a section in the Museum of Flight in Seattle dedicated to the Tuskegee Airmen. So that is all I have for you today. I hope it was enlightening. I appreciate you going through and listening to me. And so I appreciate you being here. Appreciate your time. Thank you so